Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal.
Some people think it through, some feel it out, and some just want to fix it. But trauma can change all of that. And if communication has been one of the hardest parts of your relationship, this episode is going to meet you right where you are. Today, I'm joined by Lisa Summers. She's a transformational retreat leader, communication and leadership expert, best-selling author, speaker, and a podcast host who has spent decades helping purpose-driven leaders realign with their values, their voice, and their worth. But what makes this conversation so powerful today isn't just Lisa's professional experience, it's her lived one. Lisa shares how relationships have been her greatest teachers, from growing up with an unpredictable father to navigating two very difficult marriages to the moment she realized that unless she did her own healing, she was going to keep repeating the same patterns no matter how much she tried to do things differently. We talk about that quiet but jarring realization that you can check all the boxes, look successful on the outside, and still feel hollow inside, and how recognizing that there might be another way can completely change the trajectory of your life. We also dive into communication in a really practical way. She breaks down the life languages and how trauma reshapes the way we speak, listen, and react under stress. Spoiler alert, I'm a mover. And this part of the conversation really helped me understand so much about how I show up, especially in moments of tension or conflict. And I really want you to stay to the end because Lisa shares the mindset shift that changed everything for her, moving from judgment to curiosity. And yes, Ted Lasso makes an appearance, and how that single shift helped her protect her heart without shutting it down. It's also the foundation of how she now helps others heal, lead, and communicate with so much more compassion and clarity. If you've ever felt stuck in the same communication patterns, exhausted from trying to hold it all together, or unsure how to be compassionate without losing yourself, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in.
I'd love for you to start. Oh, I see. I think you have your book in the background.
Oh,
Is
yep,
that
there it is.
right? There it is.
There it is.
Awesome. Why don't you just give me just a little bit about yourself?
Where to start?
Yeah.
So I'm a girl from the middle of America. So grew up in Missouri and Oklahoma predominantly, and then after college made a beeline for the East Coast. So lived in Washington D.C. for that area for about 12 years and worked in nonprofits and politics and trying to make the world a better place, and that's really what inspired the book, because a lot of what I learned is that my efforts to try to do good for others were a way of kind of avoiding the good I really needed to be doing for myself. And so it was during that time that I started becoming aware that decisions that I had made in my life were much more about pleasing and satisfying other people, and much less about pleasing and satisfying myself. So I don't wish that on anybody else, because you can check all the boxes and be doing all the right things by somebody else's standard and still feel completely kind of miserable inside. And so that was a big awakening for me, a big aha moment. And so then it just kind of started well, where did that come from? Well, I'm a pretty smart girl. How did I let that happen to me? How did I go down this path? So anyway, there a lot of growth along the way. Fast forward, a couple of failed marriages and a really hard relationship with my dad. Woo! That brought up additional opportunities for healing, and And I'm very happy to say that now I'm in like this incredibly just wonderful, fulfilling relationship, doing work that actually brings joy to my soul. And as of Monday, just this week, living in the most picturesque, beautiful place that I could imagine, that has also is just a place of healing too. So it's been a fun little roller coaster.
Can you tell me just a little bit about like what was going on that made you start thinking, maybe there's a better way, maybe
Yeah,
there's something I
yeah.
could do differently.
Um, I had this little kind of breakdown in sitting on a curb in a parking lot in Northern Virginia where I lived at the time. And it's like I was too young for it to be a midlife crisis. I was maybe 24 years old,
Yeah.
but I was like, I don't understand why I'm not happy. I
Yep.
mean, I've got the good job and making good money and have a decent social life and I have a significant other and I mean all the things, but I just kind of felt hollow inside. And it wasn't until later when I was working on Capitol Hill, it was right after 9/11, which kind of shook, for those of us
Yeah.
in Washington, kind of shook a lot of people's world up. And it was the first time I started working with a coach, like a personal development coach. And that work was wildly helpful for me to really see what makes me tick. And it was through that I realized that possibly because what I now recognize as trauma, which I didn't see as trauma then because I didn't know what trauma was, um, I was working to try to make everybody else happy at the expense of myself. And in working with a coach, I got really clear on what matters to me. And creating a list of personal values was one of the most powerful things I've ever done for myself. And what I realized is that my values were not reflected at all in the life that I was living. Um, and so that kind of started the process for me of being more intentional about actually living into those values, making them more than just words on a piece of paper, but it's something that I can actually feel in my life. So I think that's where it
Yeah.
started. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because almost every, person that I've interviewed on this show, I'm like, did you put together on your own, right? That maybe your past
Yeah.
was affecting, the present. And it's almost, unanimously, it's like, no, I had no idea. You're just a kid,
Yeah.
basically, in your 20s just coping. You used it to cope. And then all
Right.
of a sudden, those coping mechanisms end up not serving you as well. Right.
Yeah.
So I love that. And then how did it start to affect your relationships? You kind of
Mm,
touched on that a little bit.
yeah. Early on, relationships for me have been such teaching like channels. Just, I
Yeah.
mean, so much. It's so funny. I realized just recently, I can read all the books, I can go to all the workshops and do all the things, but it's really through relationships that I've learned the most about me, about what makes me tick, about how I want to be in the world, and even about my own spirituality. And so, early on, before I became a little bit more aware of and actually started to honor what mattered to me and what was going on inside. Early on, it was hard on relationships. I mean, if the relationship with my dad was the kind of first male relationship really that I knew, if that was the model, man, I was in for a rough go, because that that
Yes.
that was not a fun model. And it's interesting when my first husband and I got married, my dad was an alcoholic and had been my whole life. And I was like, I'm never going to marry anybody like my dad,
Oh,
and
I
to
know.
me, that meant
Right.
no alcoholics, right?
Right.
Well, the first husband didn't drink. And I thought, well, hallelujah, I kept my promise
Yeah.
to myself. Well, then I realized it was the personality aspects that he and my dad were very similar in some ways that were particularly hard for me, the whole
Yeah.
kind of bullying and I didn't even know what gaslighting was at the time, but I
No.
since I've now come to,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh,
Mm.
oh, so
Yes.
things like that I'm like, okay, I didn't marry an alcoholic, and this might even be more challenging. Um, so fortunately, it took me 12 years to finally decide I need to get out, and it took getting to a pretty dark spot for me personally before I went, whoa, this isn't how I want to be. This is not me. And so I finally decided that and it came back to our daughter. I thought, what do I want for my daughter? And for the longest time, it's like, oh, you stay in a marriage for the kids. And what I realized is that for her, I wanted her to be happy. And so the thought came to me, how can I best help support her happiness? And the only answer I could come up with was by being a good role model, that your happiness gets to matter. Like finding joy in my life could show her that finding joy in her life was okay. And that really shifted my thinking. Um, Fast forward a couple more years to husband number two, and sweetheart of a man, not didn't carry, a lot of the other tendencies. And 3 months after we're married, I'll be darned if I don't realize he's a closet alcoholic. I'm like,
No.
you've got to be kidding me.
Oh.
I didn't do that the first time. I thought I was scot-free the second time, and then and unfortunately he ended up passing away 4 years later from complete liver failure.
Oh, God.
And
Oh.
so that was a whole lot of challenge in there that I wasn't expecting. I didn't see coming. And in retrospect, I can now appreciate the fact that I hadn't done the healing I needed to do for me, um, to really expect anything different.
Really? And what does that
So,
mean? What do you mean by that?
yeah. So I think what I mean by that is it was likely that until I healed, I was going to keep repeating the same patterns
Yeah.
and drawing the same kinds of energy or the same kinds of experiences to me. And until I got to a place where I thought I deserved better or different, was actually worthy of better and different, all of which was hard after trauma early on, right? Because that's one of the things trauma does, is starts to make us question our own value and our own worth. And so I had to make a concerted effort to really shift the way I thought about myself and how I wanted to be in the world, to make space, and I had to start letting go of the hurt. The longer we hold
Mm.
on to hurt, it's just it's kind of like it just constipates your system, and doesn't leave room for anything better. So I needed to let all that crap, go,
Yes.
so that
Yeah.
so that I could make way for a relationship that now I'm so grateful I did the work, even though it wasn't easy, so that I could experience what I'm experiencing now, if that makes sense. It took courage, and a lot of
Yeah.
people,
Oh,
might not go
it's not
there, but
easy. Yeah.
but I'm so grateful that that I made the choice to value me after
Thank
all
you for
those
sharing
times
that.
that I didn't. Yeah.
Oh. And how did you start doing that? So you had a coach in
Mhm.
your in your what 20s? Was that in the 20s that you had the
Yeah, yeah.
coach?
Yeah.
How
It,
did
it
you
would have been
start?
late 20s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, honestly, through all of this, one of the things that I found for me, and um is that when stuff got rough, I found myself leaning more into my faith, which is a little different looking than what you might traditionally think for Oklahoma, which tends to be um, faith tends to be thought of in a very certain way,
Mhm.
And for me, it was starting to really listen to that inner guidance, meditating, journaling. I mean, doing the things to connect me back to me. And I think one of the biggest elements too, I remember a time when I was about 11 years old. My parents were divorced, and my dad had come down for a weekend, weekend with the kids, and he took us bowling. I was a crappy bowler. I mean, I was terrible. I
Yeah,
mean,
me
really
too.
bad,
Me
awful
too.
gutter balls all the time.
No, I couldn't
And
even lift the ball. I mean,
yeah, I was
it would
so
fall
bad.
behind me.
Yeah, yeah, you get
Yeah.
it. Well,
Mm.
my dad, he wasn't exactly the coaching type. He was more the yelling and shaming to get it right. And I start crying in the middle of the bowling alley. And then it really started about quit your crying or I'll give you something to cry about, that kind of thing. And I remember at that moment, 11 or 12 years old, making the decision that those feelings were way too messy and they weren't safe. And I remember thinking, I'm just going to shut down my heart and all this feeling stuff and just live like from the neck up. And intentionally made that choice because I thought it was safer. And um and I think that's a lot of the reasons that I made decisions that I did that ended up leaving me feeling hollow because I was completely ignoring what actually brought me joy. I'm not even sure I knew, because I just kind of pushed all that out. And honestly, it wasn't until my daughter was born. um, when she was born, it blew my heart wide open. And it's like all the walls that were around my heart just couldn't even exist anymore. I literally blew them wide open to the point where my personality, like if you've ever taken the Myers-Briggs type indicator,
Oh yeah.
my
Hmm.
Myers-Briggs test shifted,
Changed.
like totally changed from extreme thinker to predominant feeler. I mean, that's how
Oh
overwhelmingly, and
yeah.
I think what I did was I aligned with my true self after that, rather than aligning with this safe, inauthentic version of me that I was hiding in just because it didn't feel as dangerous, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so when my daughter was born, it was kind of undeniable that there was going to be a shift. But with that also came like this leaning into spirituality in a different, like very empowered sort of way. And I will say that through all of the challenging times, with the divorce, with the experience of alcoholism, and then the death of my second husband, with being the primary caretaker for my dad in his final years,
Oh
before he
boy.
passed. With all of that, it was that it's like I could hear the inner voice, and it would help me understand what to do next or how to find compassion, how to, including compassion for myself, how to set boundaries that were loving for both parties, even if they made the other person mad, they were still loving and not enabling. um, how to find this thing called grace and allow that, rather than judgment and resentment, to be the energy that I work to move forward with. And that was a total game changer. And not from any, like dogmatic perspective. It was just from like, I felt this wisdom in me that was sharing or guiding me or whatever. It was just very different, unexpected, but I'm so completely grateful. Yeah.
Oh, you just worded that so wonderfully. Thank you for sharing that. So tell me how that when did you start doing essentially what you're doing now in this process, which is,
Mm.
your bio had all kinds of fun things on there, but basically, I think you wanted to help people communicate better.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell
So
me about that.
yeah, I've been kind of an entrepreneur since about 2004. So my
2004.
daughter was
Okay.
born in 2003, and I was still working on Capitol Hill at the time. I was a communication director for a US senator, and I was seeing her about 45 minutes a day. I was on the East Coast and worked for a senator on the West Coast, and I worked with the media and deadlines. And I finally decided this is not why I became a mom. This wasn't the
Yeah.
reason. And so I left that job and started a consulting practice. And yeah, so I was consulting for the first, 4, 5 years, something like that, and then discovered coaching and leadership development and training, and you know, started a nonprofit that it was a nonprofit resource center, and the whole purpose of it was to help others who are doing good in the world just do good better. I've always been in a communication role of some sort, professionally, prior to starting my own business, and then even consulting on communication elements after that. But it's the interpersonal communication that is so critical, in my opinion, for relationships, for better understanding ourselves, and especially for leadership. To me, leadership and communication just absolutely go hand in hand. And the more we can understand and appreciate that different people have different communication styles, and that's okay. And that's part of what makes the world beautiful and interesting. And if I can communicate in a way that resonates with you, not because it's my style necessarily, but because it's the way that resonates with you, then we can have greater understanding between us.
I was reading that about the life languages. Is that right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that because I love
Yeah.
that concept.
Yeah. So the life languages itself was created, I want to say in like the 80s, maybe, um, by a couple last name of Kendall. And what was interesting is that Fred and Anna Kendall, it's my understanding that they operated some mental health facilities, and they couldn't understand why they weren't having the kind of success they thought could be possible with the clients or patients who were there. And so communication wasn't something that they were thinking about. But the more that they were seeing disconnects, the more they were like, there's got to be something here. And so they created this life languages system, in a book called Communication IQ, really with that being the backdrop. And what they started seeing was much more effective communication between doctors and patients, just between everyone within the facility. And then they realized that there was much greater application, that whether it's at home or in any kind of organization, there can be real benefit to understanding, that some people are think first communicators, other people are very much feel first communicators, and then there are some that are just take action, like they that skip the words, let's just act.
And is there's seven of them?
7, yeah, yeah.
Do you
So
know them? Like
I do. I'll even
briefly?
look.
I
Here's the
would love
book
to
right
know.
here.
Oh,
So
yes. I
they
love
they break
this.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
they break them up
Okay.
into like 3 different areas. The
Okay.
think first, which
Yeah.
are think first. There's actually 3 that are in the think first area. One is called a shaper, and these are folks who are very organized and strategic and really focused, right? Um,
Mhm.
and the second is a producer. These are people who are really financially like adept. They're hospitable, but they're super resourceful, right? So they're going to
Yeah.
have budgets, and they want to know, how are you managing your life?
Yep.
And then the third, think first, is a contemplator. And these are folks who tend to be very intelligent, inquisitive. They might be philosophical. They ask those big picture questions. But also they can really commit to something if they're interested in it. And if they're not interested in it, then they're not going to go deep on that particular thing.
Yeah.
And so those are the three that
Okay.
where their primary language is one of the thinking languages. There are two that are more primary feeling languages, and one is called an influencer, and they tend to be pretty intuitive, inclusive, enthusiastic. These are going to be like the empowering cheerleaders on a team, and I mean that in the best possible way, lifting other people up, getting people excited about things. They
Yeah.
really want to encourage others, to feel a sense of connection and affirmation of other people. And then the second feeling type communication style is that of responder. So when you think of like first responder, that's kind of similar, but they tend to be very compassionate, creative, also passionate. So they derive a lot of their energy, through emotion, or you see their energy coming through in that way. They really want to please and protect others. And what's interesting, the responders or the feel first communication type make up about 47% of the population. And but that's both men and women. So especially the responder type, we'll see them on the front lines, we'll see them in first responders, but things like football quarterbacks, soccer players, things like that, because there's so much heart there when you think about heart. And especially for men, sometimes I think that there may be an expectation societally that we don't lead with emotion in our communication, that's not okay. And that frustrates me to no end, because I think that can create so many problems for people not being able to live authentically. But then the final two areas are the kind of action first communication styles. And one is the mover, and they tend to be very innovative and direct, and they have super high standards, and they want action. Let's not sit around and talk about it all day. If something needs to happen, let's just get on it. Let's make it happen.
Yep.
And the other is the doer, and doers tend to be very practical, diligent, detailed, totally trustworthy. Like you can count on them to get stuff done. They have a great deal of tenacity and grit, and they're just going to see something through to the finish. It's so really, really dependable, and tend to be very loyal and trustworthy as well. So those are the big seven. And with the material, it talks about how each of these different languages, we all can speak every one of them, right?
Right.
It's
At
just
certain times. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a matter of what comes most naturally for us,
Okay.
which ones are we most fluent in. The others, if we need to speak that language, we can. It just may take more energy and effort, and we have to be more intentional or thoughtful about it. Also talks about how each one has distress flares. So when they are in distress, or kind of the shadow side of that language, it shows up differently. And when you start recognizing for yourself, oh, I'm acting this way. Okay. It can be a clue that something's going on to investigate, to become aware of. Or if I see, people acting in a certain way, it's an indication to me that it's a distress flare for them, and that I need to really lean into, if I know their life language, their preferred communication style, then that can give me some clues on how to lean in and give them what they need, so they can feel more comfortable and not be in a situation of distress.
I'm curious because I mean, I work with partners who are married to someone who has had trauma, and communication is the number one thing that they struggle with. So I'm just curious, in all this work you've done with that, what is your biggest recommendation, for those type of communication issues? What would you say?
Banging your head against the wall, trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work. Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together.
Yeah, I think in that arena, if it's possible to know what your style is and that of your partner, incredibly, incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Both from just being able to communicate in a way that resonates with them. And sometimes we think that everyone communicates the way we do, and that's just not the case. But also to be able to recognize those distress flares. And it's interesting how I am a firm believer that the more we think about assessments or understandings like this, it's almost like the more we know about ourselves, the more we can appreciate the differences in others rather than being like offended by them in some way or
Yes.
triggered by them. And so, for example, my husband is a mover, and he's predominantly speaks mover, and I predominantly speak influencer. And so I do have a kind of a feeling oriented communication style. And sometimes I just need to talk out loud to know what I really feel. It's like it's through the words coming out that I can identify and own the feeling. And because he is more of an action oriented engineer by background kind of guy, he goes straight into fix it.
Yep.
I mean, if I mention anything, here's how we're going to fix this. And so when we both understood what our life language was, our predominant ones, he now knows to ask. If I'm sharing something, he's like, okay, do you want me to listen or do you want me to suggest options? I'm like, nope, just need you to listen. He's like, okay. And it's like that lets him off the
Just a
hook.
little thing. Yeah.
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 Because
Just a
I think
small
one of
switch.
the most important things is not expecting people to read our minds.
Oh,
Not
so
believing
true.
that I need to read anybody else's mind, but especially not expecting them to read mine. I mean, it's a wild show going on in there. I mean, it might be a little scary if they could. So I think that's one of the elements. With my daughter, for example, her primary language is the contemplator, very intelligent, but
Mm.
also kind of introverted, a little reserved. She can go super deep, doesn't have a whole lot of like time for small talk or superficial stuff. But with her, one of the things that goes along with that life language is if she wants your attention, she wants 100% of it right now. So I had to learn, I had to just put the phone away. I had to not allow myself to be distracted by anything around me. She'd only want it for like 5 minutes, quick. But man, if there was any distraction, she was out. And so by learning that, I'm like, okay, I can focus. This is important. I can focus. But before I came across this material, I didn't know that was something that she needed, because I can have conversations and be doing 3 other
Oh
things,
yeah.
at the
Me
same
too.
time.
Mhm.
And for her, she just like,
That was,
I
yeah.
need your attention right now. Okay. And so that was actually a thing that really helped with our communication as well.
Mm.
So yeah, there's a lot of little things that I've picked up from this.
I'm curious if you had any tips for like dealing with your father and his
uh,
approach.
uh, that's a great question. I've
Mhm.
loved to have known what my dad's primary life language was. I mean,
Yeah.
I have no idea. Um, I have no idea. Um, but whatever it was, he acted in the distress flare of it like all the time. So, and so yeah, with dad, I had to kind of transcend everything I knew, and there were a couple of things that happened with him in particular. Number one was, I found with him that when I was willing to show vulnerability, that was when he would open up to me and we could have real, meaningful conversations. And I actually learned a lot about myself when he was willing to open up. But it was always because I was vulnerable first. And being willing to be vulnerable with him took a lot of courage, because,
You stuffed to cope,
yeah, yeah. And there
to
was a lot of stuff that
survive.
wasn't safe.
And that's
Yeah,
very scary.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the first times I remember I had, it was after my daughter was born. I had some depression after she was born. And, I don't know if it was postpartum. I'm not sure what it was, but I was like, I need to show up better for her. Like I wanted to deal with whatever was going on with me so I could be more joy filled for her.
Mhm.
And so therapy was not something we did in my family.
Yeah.
That was not a thing, And but I finally decided, for her, I will go talk to someone. And in doing that, the therapist immediately, asked about my family, and my relationship with my mom is great, and my relationship with my dad, not so much. And, the therapist just keeps like poking on the dad issue, keeps poking, keeps poking. And I found myself getting angry, because to me, I was there because I wanted to learn how to get better and how to be happier. And like, I didn't want my therapy to be about my dad. Like, can I have something for myself, please? And I didn't understand at the time that the whole thing with him, of course, affected me right now. I didn't
Yeah.
appreciate that, but I was just like,
Yeah.
for crap's sake, does everything have to revolve around him?
Yeah. I
And
know.
that therapist ended up firing me as a client. She broke up with me over voicemail because she had decided that I had anger issues and that she didn't feel safe having me as a patient. And I'm like, I mean, first, a I'm actually a
Well,
pretty
you
nice
have
person.
anger.
Yeah, I'm actually a pretty nice person. But
um
B, that triggered all
Approach.
the shame of all the ways that I was afraid that I was like my dad. And his anger was so big, and the thought that that was coming, that somebody was seeing that in me, I mean,
Oh,
I was horrified.
yeah.
And um so it took me a while to get back in the healing
Not the right
process.
person. Uh-huh.
No, but
Yeah.
one of the things that was good, she had identified, you have self-esteem issues. I'm like, yeah, really? Okay. But
Hmm.
my dad and I were having a conversation on the phone, and I mentioned that to him, and he said, I've dealt with that my whole life. And I'm like, huh? What are you talking about? He was
Really?
like,
Yeah.
my whole life I've dealt with self-esteem issues. He was like, and these are his words. He was like, that's why I can be such an asshole. He said, as long as I'm picking on other people first, or if I'm attacking other people, it doesn't give them a chance to come after me. And I was like, oh
Oh,
my gosh. And in that moment, I realized that all the ways that he had made me feel less than, maybe they didn't actually have anything to do with me. Maybe that was his way of making himself feel better because he struggled. And he, of course, never would get help. His approach was, I don't need anybody telling me that I'm pissed off and nuts. Okay. So he just didn't, he just took a lot of medication instead to kind of deal with it. But that moment I went, whoa, maybe he actually was doing the best he could do with the skills and just where he was. And maybe I was expecting more than he could actually offer as a dad. And maybe all the stuff that I've internalized about never being good enough, about, no achievement was ever really worthy. All the stuff that I had internalized to make me feel less about me. Maybe I didn't have to carry that around anymore.
you could release it.
Yeah. And that was a big thing, but it took me being willing to be open with him, for him to be open with me, and for me to take that openness and go, whoa, okay, what can I learn from this? So there is power in vulnerability, but man, for someone who's experienced any kind of trauma in the past, that is some scary stuff, especially if it's with the person that kind of inspired a lot of the trauma. Yeah.
That is very scary. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I totally see that in some of these relationships as
Yeah.
well. That you get so resentful, right? We get really resentful, we get frustrated, confused at all those things that we sort of lose the empathy.
Yeah.
But the minute
And
that you can tap into that, maybe this isn't about me,
yeah.
maybe this isn't even about him, that then you can come together and really try and figure out what's going on.
What's going on? Yeah. One of the biggest experiences of that just totally shifted the way I showed up with my dad. He had moved. I'd spent a lot of my adult life trying to be as far away from him physically, like geographically, as I could. And I got a call asking if I would please move my dad closer to me because there was a lot going on and it was getting ready to get ugly. He'd just gotten through his 5th divorce. And I thought, okay, this is an emotional tornado getting ready to be unleashed in my life. Okay. And of course, so I find him a little apartment in a senior center, a senior citizens village, it was about 20 minutes from my house, and move him and his little dog there. And my dad was one of these that was really demanding, but never satisfied with anything. Like, but
You
then
could
he'd have
never win.
moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then he'd have moments of being really grateful. It was such a
Yeah.
confusing
So
relationship
bizarre.
because he could be so much fun. And I mean, I loved him. I loved him deeply, but man, there were a lot of times I didn't like him at all, and so
Yes.
it was really confusing. But I remember one day I was filling his pill boxes or something at his house, and he was just being such a jerk. And I thought, I just got to take a walk, so that's one thing I've learned about me. When it just gets to be too much, I got to get outside. And there's something about just being outside that kind of brings me back to myself and lets some of that resentment and frustration
Walk it out. Walk it out.
just ground it off. But while I was walking, that voice that I mentioned, kind of came to me again and said, every time you feel yourself wanting to judge, view it as an invitation to love more instead. And I was like, whoa, you're asking a lot, whoa, you're asking a lot. And then it was like, and that includes loving yourself more. I'm like, huh, okay, what does this mean? Um, but it was weird how that became like when I would feel myself judging, okay, how can I love more? I don't have to love the action. I don't have to love, I don't even have to whatever. I can have boundaries and that's okay. That's me loving me, when I do have
Mhm.
boundaries. Um, but that was just such a weird brain flip at that time to go, oh, from judgment to can I lean into love just a little more? Um, and what I've the next place I've gone from that is just about getting curious. And this came, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Ted Lasso on Apple.
Do I miss that show?
I
I was
freaking
so sad when it ended and then when I watched the last episode, it was so
I
good.
love Ted Lasso. I've got my little Ted Lasso
You
bobblehead like doll over
do.
here. He's got a little believe sign. Um,
Oh.
but there was one scene where Ted is in a bar playing darts against Rupert, the owner of
Mhm.
the opposing club. And there's this whole scene about curiosity versus judgment. And that just struck a chord with me in the most positive kind of way. And whether it's through communication, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in leadership, every I have found that if I just get curious about a situation, about a person, about what makes somebody tick, about whatever, and try better understand, A, it keeps me out of judgment, but B, I don't have to agree to understand, right? But if I can better understand where you're coming from, then I can also have more compassion. I can also choose not to go to judgment. I can, there's so much more there that just getting curious about people and about ourselves, I think is an incredible healing balm. So it started with every time you feel yourself getting, wanting to judge, love more, and then it kind of went to another level with
To now
just
get
the whole
curious.
curiosity thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would 100% agree with that. And that takes usually taking a break,
Hmm.
number one,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you feel yourself having those big emotions, to first, taking a break. And I think, yeah, you're right, getting curious. And sometimes you may never really know what's really going on, right?
Yeah.
But being curious allows you to be open to, this maybe this doesn't have to do with me. Maybe this doesn't have to do with them. It could just be that, they had a bad wreck or so, something
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
bad happened to them in the morning. And then you're okay. And then that leaves you to be more empathetic and not internalize
Mhm.
it. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing all that.
Absolutely. And one thing with trauma too,
Yeah.
I was talking to a therapist, within the past year or so, and I was talking about procrastination.
Yeah.
And like I get really frustrated with myself because I'll know I've got big stuff I need to do and I just put it off and put it off. And we hadn't talked about trauma at all. But this therapist and I, she goes, "Oh,
uh,
that's a classic trauma response." And I'm like, trauma? What are you talking about? Trauma? What trauma? Like, even as of a year ago, I wasn't fully appreciating it because to
yeah.
me, trauma was, you know, a landmine going off
War,
near you, war,
battle.
car wreck,
Hmm.
horrible, physical things that happen to people. And it didn't dawn on me until like the very next day, a Facebook memory came up that as I was reading it, I was like, oh, oh, yeah. And then I could see the pattern. But even this summer, I took my mom on we went on a 3 week like Yellowstone, Grand Teton, Wild West adventure. And we were having a conversation about trauma. And mom's like, what trauma did you ever experience? What are you talking about trauma?
Right.
Because she too thought physical war, car wreck, whatever. And as we were talking through it, she was like, oh my goodness, you mean so like emotional abuse can be considered trauma? I'm like, she was like, oh Lord, yeah, got it. Now I understand. And that
Yes.
it was interesting, that we can be on this path for decades and yet not even recognize or
Not
fully
see it in
appreciate
what
what the
it's
path
in
is.
themselves, in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is why we need to talk about it more,
Yeah.
in my
Absolutely.
opinion. Because
Absolutely.
if you can start to identify that, yes, that some of those coping mechanisms that we used to survive could be just that, right? Survival things that can be tweaked if it's not working
Mm-hmm.
for you anymore.
Yeah.
But we need to talk about it and recognize it and all
And
those
release it.
things and
Yeah.
release
And let
it.
it go. Yeah.
Oh, and
Yeah.
let it
That,
go.
yeah. One thing I noticed for the longest time, I didn't speak my words, but I ate my feelings, right? Literally
Yes.
ate my feelings. And so have struggled with weight my whole life. And to finally find a weight loss approach that recognizes the emotional implications of carrying around that baggage. I
Stuffing.
mean, literally carrying the baggage,
Yeah.
and being willing to make those shifts and that release in a way that where I can make progress, and even with that, I mean, the results just recently have been kind of shocking to me. Like, oh, look at that. Recognizing that trauma has an effect on the body, that we do have the ability to take back that control um, by being intentional, that we can let it go, and that the pounds can go with it. Brilliant.
What?
Whoa. Amazing. Amazing.
Oh, tell us about Real Big Love.
Yeah. So Real Big Love is just a book I wrote. I think it came out in 2018. And it's really kind of a love letter for all the people out there trying to make a difference in the world, who
Oh,
often prioritize e- everything other than themselves. So it's kind of a
yeah.
reminder that you get to matter. And one of the things I set up in the book is this idea of service. We've also often heard selfless service being like, um,
Kind of a
given
buzz.
wings and halos, in the
Hmm.
world. And my point on that is that selfless service really isn't sustainable. That if we're always putting ourselves last, if we're always putting everyone else's needs before our own, then we don't have the energy or the passion to continue serving. So I set up a different kind of way to look at it, as more soulful service, like serving in a way that actually fills up your soul, or that is soul infused, where you're filling your cup and serving from the overflow of filling your own cup. But to me, soul aligned service just is so much more sustainable and joy filled. So better for the others and for you.
And I love the title, Real Big Love. I love
Yeah.
that. And
Thanks.
now you're living in Colorado, right?
Yes. Dream come true.
And
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And tell me what you're doing now. So are you still
Sure.
coaching?
Yeah,
And
still coaching and consulting,
okay.
doing leadership training, and development, things like that. But when we bought this property in January and then went into renovations, we've got 4 acres up in the mountain outside of Colorado Springs. And but the cabins, you can tell it's literally a log cabin. It was built in 1904 and to support the gold
Oh,
mining operation in the area. This cabin that I'm in right now was actually the brothel for
oh,
the gold
okay.
mining camp. So there you
Yeah.
go.
Very
There you go.
historic.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got this little tiny room that I'm sure there was a lot of activity in at some point, and now it's my office. So yeah,
Yeah.
different kind of activity now. But my dream is to host personal development retreats here, especially for people who have carried around the weight of challenging relationships and want to spend 4 days relaxing, being completely taken care of, but also just investing in themselves and their own awareness of their needs, their values, their inner voice, in what is, to me, one of the most beautiful environments in the world. I mean, just surrounded by huge pines, canyons all around. I mean, it's gorgeous. And I've got 57 miles of different hiking trails from my front door, like right here. So you can get all up in nature.
Nature.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I just truly believe that there's something wildly healing about nature. Nature doesn't judge, it's the one place that I know that when I'm just completely overwhelmed, I have to get outside. I just have to get outside. If I can get outside and be barefoot or find a spot of sunshine, even better. Um, and it's not, my dad used to call it my hippy dippy tree hugging ways, it's not necessarily that,
No.
it's just,
Yeah.
to me, there's something renewing and wildly healing about being willing to be in nature and making that a priority. So anyway,
I
I just want to
cannot wait
invite
for that.
others. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I am, love the idea of that retreats. And how
Yeah.
can people find you?
Yeah. So probably the easiest way right now is either through my website, which is just goldenenergyleadership.com. Um,
Okay.
or I'm still over on Facebook. So just Lisa MF Summers at Facebook is a way to find me as well.
Well, I know why you're in communication. And
You're
why you're
kind.
doing what you're doing, because you just have such great energy.
No.
I loved hearing, your story and your perspective and your learnings. And thank you so much. And I know you're going to do so much good with this place in Colorado. I cannot wait to watch and see it.
Oh, thank you. This has just been such a treat. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with you. Thank you.
Oh, I hope that you loved that conversation with Lisa as much as I did. And this is your chance to hear the real deal. My three biggest takeaways that I want you to take from this conversation that I had with Lisa. Number one, people say that having kids brings up all your stuff. And that is very true. But I would argue that intimate relationships are just as powerful of a teacher. Romantic relationships have a way of surfacing our unhealed wounds, our coping strategies, and our patterns in a way that are impossible to ignore. And until you do your own healing, you will often keep seeing the same dynamics show up in different people. This is why the work has to start with you, not fixing your partner, not managing their behavior, but healing yourself to make room for the kind of relationship you actually deserve. And number two, sometimes you have to transcend everything you think you know about communication to break harmful patterns. You can read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, even spend decades teaching communication, and still find yourself repeating the same relationship dynamics. Knowledge alone doesn't undo trauma. Real change often requires unlearning, humility, and a willingness to look at what's happening underneath the words. And third, this one is foundational. Loving yourself more will improve your relationships, period. And boundaries are me loving me. They are not punishment, control, or rejection. They are self respect in action. When you stop abandoning yourself in the name of keeping the peace, everything about how you show up in relationships begins to change. If this episode stirred something with you, I hope it reminded you that healing isn't about becoming someone new, it's about coming back to yourself. And when you do that, the way you love, communicate, and connect naturally shifts. Please share this with someone who you know could benefit, because this is the real deal. And I'll see you again next week.
All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, the real deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.